Hello and welcome. My name is Phil Melton. I'm with MercuryGate International, and I'm happy to say that we are continuing our discussions with Iyer from LoadSmart. How does dynamic pricing really help a shipper? And I know you talked a little bit about this earlier about the quicker bids, right? I know in the past, I've been in the industry for almost 40 years. I've been around a long time. I've always seen, oh, every 2 years we do a bid and we load the rates in. That's no longer the standard, right? Yeah, you just can't do that and survive in today's world. You need that
No.
dynamic pricing. You need the dynamic RFPs, if you will. So explain a little bit about that and what you see in the marketplace.
Yeah. Um, and you said it really well, right? We think that shippers are at a point where they need dynamic pricing. And I think that when people hear the words dynamic pricing, they often think of spot rates. But what we do has really key implications in the context of contracted freight and the route guide setting within Mercury Gate, right? That's what we're really talking about. So particularly in that context of backup rates. As you know, Phil, in the traditional RFP, people have a way of, the norm is that they run the RFP, they have a list of backup rates, and they hold them over so that when that primary rejects the tender, they have a list of who to go to, right? So you have your carriers arranged into a route guide in the TMS, maybe arranged by price or preference. The problem with that model is that the majority of the time, the backup carriers don't honor that rate, especially in today's market. And, because they didn't win the volume associated with it, or because they're chasing better, spot rates. And so as a result, you waste so many hours trying to cover those last minute spot loads. You have to first manually identify drivers that are available, and then you have to go and secure the bids. And it's this whole process that's so time consuming and we think outdated. And we think that, there's a lot of resources that are going into that. And so with LoadSmart's approach to, dynamic pricing, what our integration allows you to do is actually drop that real-time rate right into the routing guide. That rate can be, dropped in either after your contracted commitments or based on price, right? Based on rates of your backup carriers in MercuryGate. And then as you work your way through the waterfall and you arrive at the LoadSmart rate, the difference is, our rate is 100% bookable. So if you tender it to LoadSmart, we will move it. Um, and so one, Phil, we think this gives you access to information about the market, but obviously it saves you tremendous amount of time. It's a really cost-effective way for you to have for you to be able to execute on every price that you see without having to resort to a random carrier in the spot market, potentially suffer, service failures and so on. And your planner doesn't have to make a single call, send a single email to confirm that the load will move. And so really that is the value of dynamic pricing in the route guide, Phil. It changes this system of static rates into dynamic ones that reflect market conditions. And in thinking about it this way, that's different from the norm or how shippers used to think about the route guide. We think that that's where the power of the technology shows itself, right? And being able to change how people work. When you think about technology we use every day to make our lives easier, right? Something as simple as a food delivery app. That really changes how we think about certain things, certain tasks that used to be so difficult to do. And similarly here, when challenges in getting coverage come down to two things, which is, the amount of time you spend in finding capacity and then the price you pay for it, we think that dynamic pricing within the route guide really changes how you think and how you work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think the more dynamic your pricing models can be in your rate, your route guide, if it's dynamic and you got the load smart board there, or not board, but the rate there, you pick that, you go, and it's 100% capacity. Just a real quick question on that. How does LoadSmart vet out the carriers that you have rates with? I'm assuming that you do a good job of vetting them out. And I know we do as well on the MercuryGate side, but can you talk a little bit about that just real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a pretty wide network at this point. We've got, hundreds of thousands of carriers really. And the big thing with how we work is that the entire operational onus falls on us, right? We take complete ownership, complete liability for every single load. And so that piece, vetting the carriers, is very, very important to us. We know that, the proof is in the pudding, or in this case, the execution of the load, right? And so we have a whole team that works to vet carriers. So the usual safety records and FMCSE scores and so on, making sure that maintenance records are up to date. But then we also have technology that goes a level deeper that's constantly monitoring those things. So if we find, for some reason, for example, somebody changed their MC number to hide a misdoing, our technology will automatically, lock them out of our system. So, it's kind of a two-pronged approach. And then I think the big piece here is that capacity development in the carrier sales team that is constantly building relationships with these carriers. So it's not, a one-time thing. We're working with them, we know who they are, and as much focus as we place on the shipper side and building these customer relationships, we very much place that emphasis on the carrier side too.
That's awesome. I appreciate that.